Hi, everyone. Ed Bixby here from the Global Green Burial Alliance, and this is Spotlight Now. Today, I'm here with Michelle Menter of Greensprings Natural Cemetery Preserve. Michelle is the executive director of Greensprings Natural Cemetery Preserve and came to this work after a personal loss. She's a mother of two, an artist, and a longtime volunteer in her hometown. And I can say to the audience that, Greensprings is a pioneer in this movement. I've known them for a very long time. They do wonderful work up in Ithaca, New York. I mean, first class operations. So we really appreciate you being here today, Michelle.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
So why don't we get started? For our viewers who may not know much about Greensprings, learning a little bit about how it came to be, what inspired its creation. I mean, my goodness, we're going back to the opening in 2006, so it's been a long journey.
Yeah. Well, all right. It was a bit of synchronicity that brought it all together, but there were two different groups of people who were thinking about natural burial at the same time. So at Cornell University, which is here in Ithaca, there were some academic environmentalists who had actually started this group called the Pre-Posthumous Society, and they were thinking about how do I live my values beyond my bodily life? And I think that they were thinking in at the beginning of scattering cremains in a natural setting. I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure that they had their vision fully formed. But then there were also two women from Corning, New York, which is like 30 minutes south of Ithaca, who knew that they wanted to do natural burial. And the two came together, the two groups came together, and I think Mary Woodson might have been that person who brought the two together. But when the two women who knew natural burial was what to do and the pre-posthumous society folks heard about it, it was just this natural like aha moment where now all the right players were in the room. So people had connections. There was someone who had acreage that they were thrilled to be able to offer for this purpose. The town of Newfield was supportive at one of the early board meetings or town hall meetings. One of the people stood up and voiced their support, saying that they would love to have Greensprings in Newfield. They would be quiet neighbors. And that person actually ended up being and still is one of our volunteers. But so yeah, it was a meeting between kind of practical minded individuals and more theoretically inclined people who came together to agree that this was a great answer to how do we live our values after our bodies are gone or not living.
Well, I must tell you, and I'll tell the audience, I've known many people from Green Springs over the years, and Mary was a dear friend. Mary Woodson had passed this year, for anyone who doesn't know. Uh, what a character. Mary was like, she was like a beaming light when she came into the room.
Yes.
You could not ignore Mary, that's for sure. Joel Rabinowitz, way back when, there was a lot of people that were involved in the early days. So they did a lot of heavy lifting, and boy, oh boy,
Yeah.
what a great job they did. And
Yep.
Green Springs, I know how beautiful Green Springs is, but if you could talk a little bit, paint a little picture for our viewers about what Green Springs looks like, what the space consists of,
Okay.
just let them know.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I would love to do this. And I'll do my best. And then just, I want to strongly recommend that anyone who can come and experience it for yourself. But Green Springs is this little like blip of meadowland surrounded by about 6,500 acres of forest. It is up at one of the highest points in Tompkins County, and it's rolling meadows and all state land on one side and the Arnott Forest managed by Cornell University on two other sides. And we're high up in the air and we're high up we're elevation wise, we're high up. And it's a sanctuary for birds and butterflies. Spring migrating birds come through, and it's a really exciting thing that birders from all over, particularly the Cayuga Bird Club, lead so many different hikes there in the springtime. And late July. You can barely take a step without butterflies flitting up in front of you. With every step, there's hiking trails throughout our perimeter. So it's like several miles of hiking trails. There are pathways, of course, through all six of our burial areas. We just opened two more burial areas. It's 130 acres. I think I may have, I'm not sure if I included that, but it's fairly vast and it's open with occasional trees, um, little like forest or tree groupings, but primarily it's open meadowland and it's really beloved by the pollinators and the birds that we welcome and use our land management practices to support.
And that sounds absolutely beautiful, and I agree with you. I think there's no other way to experience it than to actually
Yeah.
visit. So hopefully, people put it on your list for a place to stop by. Wintertime, I'm sure it's quite cold, but equally as beautiful. But the spring and summer, I'm sure, is magnificent, and the fall. So
Yeah, oh my goodness, right? We see it's a really great place for leaf peeping because we're up so high and surrounded by so many forests. But yeah, it's really gorgeous in all seasons.
well, you guys are doing a wonderful job, and it is beautiful. And it also, as we both know, these are true experiences, for the families themselves. A memorable experience, which often sometimes sounds a little odd to people who don't understand what we do. But at the end of the day, uh, we have to think about our loved ones and what the final statement of their life was. So we create these unique spaces, and I know you guys have some unique spaces for solace and reflection, such as the Remembrance Grove and the Wind Phone. Can you tell us a little bit more about these spaces and offerings?
Yeah, I would love to. Um, so actually, like you said, I came to this work after personal loss. I had lost a baby in utero, and so I was grieving that. And the very I had actually said like I don't have I didn't feel like I had time to take this job, but I was invited to attend a burial of a 7-month-old who had no family attending. So he was brought swaddled in the funeral director's son's baby blanket. And it was me and the gal who had invited me, who was the then treasurer and is now our current bookkeeper, and other board members and other staff. And we created something that it felt like stone soup, like everyone was just putting in their own humble offerings to this service. But we collectively made the most beautiful send off for this little child. So whatever comes next, I just felt like we had really done right by this little fellow. And and it was very nurturing for me to have that experience. And afterwards, I was feeling like I wish that there was a place for people to pilgrimage to, for especially for those who didn't have anyone to bury like me, but also for anyone who is grieving that loss of a child because it feels so singularly heartbreaking and also so lonely. So the Remembrance Grove was one of the first projects that I undertook when I started working at Greensprings, and it's this beautiful little spot in a locust woodlet. It's just a little, maybe it's like, I guess it's about maybe it's like 90 feet long and 30 feet wide or 45. It's not very large, but you can walk in and there's this open little clearing. So you're surrounded by all these beautiful trees. There are two stone benches and there's this memorial cairn. Everyone who comes, who wants to, can bring a stone no larger than the palm of their hand and add it to this cairn. And each stone represents a child that someone has lost. And the the feeling of seeing those stones or laying down a stone there to add to the stones that are already there, it just feels like a comforting reminder that you're not all alone, that this grief is something that other people are carrying too. So that was our very first place for people to come who are grieving. I mean, obviously, the whole cemetery and nature in general really welcomes people's grief. It's a great place to go when you're sad because nature has this comforting way of reminding you of kind of the rightness of of things beginning and being in their lushness and being in their dormancy or dying. But but making that a point of what we do, like going out of our way to also support people in grief through our natural places, is really something that we've given more attention to over the years. So another special place that we have is the wind phone. And it's out on this loop called the Herb Engman Loop. He was actually a longtime board member, but also a amazing benefactor to Greensprings. He donated almost all the land that we are on. He donated 100 acres and then we purchased an additional 30. So anyway, it's out on this loop named after him, the Herb Engman Loop. You walk along and you're going down a little meadow and then up a slight incline and then off on one side, there's this stone bench and a maple tree and a beautiful phone carved out of wood, honey locust, that it's like an old-fashioned telephone, like what you and I would have grown up holding. Um, so it's corded. It's attached to the tree, but you pick it up and you can sit on the stone bench and talk to someone. I mean, it's an invitation to talk to someone who has died. And maybe you never got to say special important things to your dad, or maybe you needed to tell your sister about this great thing that happened that she would have loved. But it's this invitation to sit with someone who isn't here anymore and honor your grief, honor your relationship, reconnect in this really supportive way. And then our third place of solace is kind of still in a state of becoming, but it's called the Reflection Pond. And it's just this beautiful little pond. Actually, one time we do this biennial art class um, called Art in the Meadow. And it's like a philosophy and on plein air sort of watercolor drawing class. But I was over at the pond and working on a drawing, and this deer came up and didn't see me, but was just so it was just living its natural, like not startled life, and was drinking from the pond, and I was getting to sit there and enjoy it. So the pond itself isn't exactly like earmarked for a particular type of grief, or it doesn't have anything specific yet happening to support. I mean, maybe we will have like a journal there for people, but anyway, it's still up and coming, but that's our third one so far.
And they all sound lovely. And I mean, I think what's really important for the viewers to understand is how important things like this actually are, because, part of what we do is help people gain a greater form of acceptance of a passing, but then also come to grips with the grief that comes along with it. And then that turns to the celebration of a life that was lived. So, children in particular are some of the toughest cases we have to deal with. And it's so difficult for a parent, with a loss and the wind phone, all of that sounds wonderful. I mean, I think that really inspires people, and I hope it inspires some of the people who are watching this, because it's really incredibly important to create these spaces. So kudos to you guys. And this brings me to a really an interesting question. So again, I refer back to a long history with Greensprings, and it was a long time ago. There was a film made, A Will for the Woods, and Greensprings had participated in that. And I think one of the most poignant parts of that was the very beginning, when the experience of Greensprings. And I'd like to ask what the funeral experience is like, and if a family was to have a service. But I do also encourage people watching this, even if you can't watch the entire movie, watch the very beginning. That tells it all, when those horses are going through the snow. So if you could paint a little picture for our viewers as if what they might expect if they were to come for an actual service itself.
Sure. Okay. So let's let's pretend that there's a burial today because there's a lot of snow on the ground. So hopefully everyone has dressed warm for it, because since we're up so high, the wind might be blowing more. It's probably colder. Like all of the weather at Green Springs is a little bit more intense than whatever's happening at the lower elevation, like in town. So a burial begins with the funeral director pulling up and the family arriving, and we gather at this circle and bring the person out and put them on, in this case, because it's winter, it would be on a toboggan. And the person who has died maybe is in a pine casket or is in a shroud or is in a willow casket or a cardboard box. And actually, we've had burials where the cardboard box went home with the family the night before the loved one was going to be put into it, and family and grandkids, people had used crayons and stuff and just decorated all of the box so beautifully. There was another time where at the service they decorated it with honey and flower petals and elderberry juice. But so we bring the person out, they're on the toboggan, and we process together to the gravesite. And it's always it's always the family's first option to be the one who pulls the cart or the toboggan to the gravesite. And because it's hilly, there'd be one or two people up at the front pulling the toboggan, and there'd be one or two people at the back kind of operating like brakes. And we go to the gravesite. The grave is open, and there are evergreen boughs at the bottom of the grave, and there are evergreen boughs at the head and foot of the grave. Maybe the family has brought flowers. And so those might be also decorating the grave, or they might be held by the family until the end. But we bring the person out, off of the toboggan, and they go onto two crossboards. So now they're kind of hovering over the open grave, and and then the service happens, and the service is whatever feels right for the family. There have been some sort of Quaker style ones where it was all silent, and if someone felt inspired to share something, then they did. There have been others where it was silent because everyone was so struck by the suddenness or surprise of the death. Like I'm thinking of this one young woman with two young kids and her husband, and everyone was just quiet. And then at a certain point, he just apologized and said that he just didn't know what to say. And everyone just assured him that they understood. And other times there's singing and there's stories, there's laughter. I remember one where a young man had committed suicide, and the mother was so angry at having to choose a site, at having to bury her son, and and she wouldn't probably have chose Greensprings. Actually, it was completely unusual for her, and I think she would have, if she were the one choosing, she would have gone with a more conventional burial. But his former partner is Muslim, and so for him, natural burial was the right way to go, and he was paying for it. So he had said, "I would love to cover it. Can we do it at Greensprings?" So anyway, within just a few minutes of the service, the family was just all sitting on the grass. This was a summertime burial, and telling stories and laughing and swearing and just feeling like really comfortable and at home. I felt like we were there at maybe like a family party around a bonfire or something. And stories just kept pouring out about how this man was the best of them, the funniest, the always had the best ideas, the handsomest, and I'm not, I feel pretty confident that she wouldn't have had that opportunity to share and to listen to those stories had they been inside a funeral home with the service that she had thought she would prefer. So I think that she got a real gift that day by having a natural burial instead of the conventional one that she thought would happen. But okay, so the service looks like however it looks because it's as unique as the person being buried and the family and friends who come to honor them. But at a certain point, there's kind of a quiet that settles over everyone and this sense that they've said what they needed to say. And so then we move to filling in the grave. And maybe before that, people are going to put flowers into the grave. But then at a certain point, people put shovelfuls of earth if they want, or handfuls of earth. And sometimes, like in a Jewish burial, they use the backside, like the shovel upside down, to get a bit of earth to put in because that symbolizes the hardship of saying goodbye to a loved one. So we work together. The family leads the process of putting in as much dirt as they want to. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes people will fill in the grave entirely. Like there was a dad once who, I mean, some of our soil is really rocky, so it's quite an undertaking. And he was just shoveling, and I was like, "We can fill this in for you because we have a backhoe, and that's what we typically do." And he said, "No, it's an honor and a responsibility. I need to do it." And that's how sometimes people feel. So then it gets filled in either mechanically or by friends and family. There was another burial where friends all filled in the grave, and then two women danced on top of this wonderful woman's grave. And I knew her personally also, and know that she would have really approved of that. So the grave gets filled in, however it gets filled in, and then family process back up to the parking lot and go. And actually, these days we also, after when the season is right, we go back out and we prep the site, and then we seed it, and we plant native plants on top of it from our greenhouse because we've started doing that. I should not our greenhouse, but our nursery. And later, families are always welcome to either join us in planting or plant on their own, but we'll prep the grave for them. And then later also, families might choose to have a stone engraved. And the stones are all ones that we've found on site, or native field stones that they may have in their gardens or backyards. But that'll be engraved with whatever they want. We have a stone that says "She kicked ass." That's all it says. And so sometimes I like go back to search in our database, like who kicked ass, to remember this gal's name. And there's someone else who has a stone that says Queen of the Universe. So stones, range from something interesting and unique like that to like the person's name and date of birth and date of death or poetry. Um, but the stone gets installed flush with the earth, and then families visit as often as they like or come to our events. So yeah, that's like the full story of what
Well,
happens at a grave.
I really appreciate you taking the time to share all of those memories, and because that's what's so interesting is how memorable and impactful all of these events actually are. And for the viewers who are watching this who are would-be cemeterians or people who would like to volunteer, just look at the enrichment of your life. Look to Michelle and see how you just described these experiences that change not only you and who you are, but the ones that surround you. So, you guys, again, you do wonderful work there. And this next question is an interesting one because a lot of times this would be for someone who has maybe been doing this for a few years, but of course, with 20 years, you guys are seasoned veterans. But I think it might be great to get your reflection for the future of the would be or the newbies, in the sense that you know, typically we would say, have you seen an increased interest in eco-friendly funeral options in your area, and how has the local community received this project? Well, we know you guys have been very successful. So with asking that question, I guess, like, how does the community now, 20 years later, like, how do they embrace and are they a part of what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, so actually, I was just learning from a funeral director that this year we're the second, or last year we were the second busiest cemetery in Tompkins County. And that means that we were practically tied with the first. But these are cemeteries that have been there. In one case, it was 150 years. In the other case, it's a little more than 200 years. So so I think that we've been there long enough that thousands of people have been on the land and had those experiences. And when you witness a burial like this, it does affect you and it changes you, and you tell someone about it. You tell them that like butterflies were landing on the casket, or that a raven called from the forest the whole time, or whatever. This because we're in this like synchronistic relationship with nature, and people are in this headspace where they are just more attuned than when you're heading from one appointment to the next or something. These experiences are profound, and so they're telling people. So yeah, at this point, I think there's still room for us to let more people know and to do stuff that encourages the people who are saying in their heads, I'm going to go to Greensprings when I die, to come out first and have an experience where they walk the land or something. But so there's room there, but yeah, we have gotten over a lot of hurdles just by virtue of staying so long. But I'm worried I didn't answer your question. Did you want to know what the future might look like for us?
No, 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 no. You answered the question
Okay.
concerning, because I think it's important for like I said, people who maybe have just entered this journey to realize that, you got to crawl before you walk. And at some
Yeah.
point, like you said, you're going to get so many people who have these positive experiences that it'll just transcend and you'll grow and grow and grow. So I just want them to
Yep.
know that, this is not a good deed that, how they say no good deed goes unpunished. This is very rewarding, and at some
Yes.
point, if you stick with it, it will absolutely be very impactful, not only for yourself, but for the community. And that would bring me to what you were going to say. My favorite part of my interview always is, where do you hope to see Green Springs? You've done so much already, but let's say if we look in the future, 10 more years, is there anything in particular you would like to achieve to see happen at Green Springs? Or do you feel like you guys have matured into exactly what it was always meant to be?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I do think I love where we're headed, but I want to explore more about grave renewal. Um, I I think the longer we last, the longer that we exist as a country with people living and dying, being born and living and dying, the more we have to be realistic about how eventually all the land how eventually we're going to have to do grave renewal, how eventually we probably would love it if we could use a burial site again. And most of the world does stuff like this. Um, and I think that there's three, you might know this better, Ed, but I think that there's three cemeteries that are doing it in the US now. And so, not for our two new burials and areas, and not for any of our existing burial areas would we do grave renewal. But I want to learn more about that and think about if we could and how we could do do grave renewal in a way that is really honoring and feels mission aligned for people who are looking for a sustainable, earth loving bodily disposition method. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I look forward to us having a conservation easement. So right now we're at that like mid-level in certification with the Green Burial Council, but the idea of taking us up to a conservation cemetery level feels really meaningful and really like an investment in the things that every person who chooses to be buried at Green Springs hopes that we can promise, that foreverness to our nature preserve mission. And a conservation easement gives that sort of legal quality to our nature preserve work.
Well, I think those are wonderful things to strive for. And what's really interesting is, the grave renewal topic has come up for years, but more so as of late. And I actually just did an interview yesterday that has not aired yet with
Oh,
Reflection
cool.
Park down in Washington, D.C., and they practice grave renewal. So
Yeah.
I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. And the interesting thing part of that, about that conversation is there's no laws that prohibit it. It can
Right.
happen anywhere. It's just a matter of a little legalese when it comes to the space and the people who occupy it. So I must say to our viewers, it's been a pleasure to interview you, Michelle, and it's an honor because Green Springs really, you guys are right there up at the top. You have been leaders in this movement for a very long time, near and dear to my heart because I know a lot of the people that were founders. I really appreciate meeting you, and I would love to know that our viewers watch this, enjoy it, and maybe come up and pay a visit to you guys and see how beautiful it actually is. So, thanks for joining us today, Michelle. Viewers, you can learn more by visiting naturalburial.org. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Ed.
All right, everyone. Ed Bixby here from Global Green Burial Alliance, and this was Spotlight Now.